He was the master of the Heavenly Pavilion, a mysterious organization that controlled the world's wealth, intelligence, and assassins. Even emperors feared his name. Yet the man who could shake the entire continent willingly gave away everything for one woman. The Holy Senses. Because of her, he disbanded his elite forces, handed over countless priceless treasures, and even revealed the Heavenly Pavilion's hidden strongholds to support the royal family. He believed every sacrifice would bring peace to the world. Instead, it became the beginning of his nightmare. The Crown Prince used the Heavenly Pavilion's resources to strengthen the empire. The Senses accepted every gift while convincing him to sacrifice even more. One by one, the elders of the Heavenly Pavilion died, protecting the organization he had weakened with his own hands. His most loyal subordinates fell in battle. His closest confidants were executed as traitors. Only after losing everything did he realize he had merely been a weapon in the hands of the royal family. The most powerful man on the continent now stood alone, surrounded by countless cultivators who had come to witness his death. The Crown Prince looked at him as if he were nothing more than a disposable pawn. The Senses no longer hid the disgust in her eyes. The Senses declared that the Forbidden's blood flowing through his body had become the last stain upon the continent. For the sake of lasting peace, she claimed his sacrifice was unavoidable. Only then did he realize the greatest hypocrisy. The medicine that had kept him alive for years had been given to him by the Senses herself. She had used the Blood Alchemist's blood to save him. And now she was using that very blood as the reason to execute him. As the execution blade descended, he finally learned one last truth. The mysterious medicine that had saved his life countless times had never come from the Senses. The Blood Alchemist, whom he had misunderstood until the day she died. Regret consumed him. If only he had discovered the truth sooner. He closed his eyes as the blade pierced his heart. Perhaps even the heavens pitied him. They gave him one final chance. Then he opened his eyes. He was no longer standing on the execution platform. Instead, he was back inside the Heavenly Pavilion. The familiar room, the familiar scent of sandalwood. Everything was exactly as it had been 3 years ago. He immediately rushed outside. The elders who had died protecting him were still alive. The subordinates he had watched fall one by one were all standing before him. He had truly returned to the past. Joy quickly turned into unbearable guilt. He remembered every face that had died because of his blind devotion. He had destroyed the Heavenly Pavilion with his own hands. Not because he was weak, but because he trusted the wrong person. Then another face appeared in his mind, the Blood Alchemist. The woman he had personally executed in the name of justice. Only after his own execution did he learn that every medicine keeping him alive had been made from her blood. She had saved him countless times. At that moment he made 2 vows. He would never allow the Heavenly Pavilion to fall again. And he would never let the Blood Alchemist die a second time. Just then, a royal envoy arrived at the Heavenly Pavilion. He respectfully presented a familiar invitation. The Holy Senses wished to see him. Just like his previous life, without hesitation, he threw the invitation into the fire. As the flames reduced it to ashes, he would never again become the Saintess's sword. The royal banquet soon arrived, just like his previous life. Every influential family across the continent gathered inside the imperial palace. Xiao Han, the master of the Heavenly Pavilion, arrived. The lively banquet instantly fell silent. Even the leaders of the great clans lowered their heads. No one dared to meet his gaze. It was said that offending the imperial family might cost someone their title. But offending the master of the Heavenly Pavilion could wipe out an entire clan overnight. Even the Crown Prince, Murong Jin, greeted him with courtesy. Because everyone knew. The Heavenly Pavilion controlled the continent's greatest intelligence network. Its merchants dominated every major city. And its hidden experts were feared by every sect. Even emperors thought twice before making an enemy of Xiao Han. Moments later, Yanzi, the Holy Senses, entered the hall. Just as she had in his previous life. Every young genius rushed forward hoping to earn her attention. In his previous life, Xiao Han would have been the first to walk to her side. But this time, he never even looked in her direction. A trace of confusion flashed across Yunzi's eyes. For the first time, the man who had always stood behind her ignored her completely. Soon after, Murong Jin, the crown prince, entered the banquet hall. Walking quietly behind him was Su Qingli, the future head of the Blood Alchemist family. She simply followed behind Murong Jin in silence. Her expression remained as cold as ever. The moment Xiao Han saw her, his heart trembled. She was still alive. The woman he had personally sentenced to death in his previous life now stood only a few steps away. No one in the hall spared Su Qingli a second glance. Every eye remained fixed on Yunzi. No one knew. While one woman was worshipped as the continent's savior, the other had silently used her own blood to keep its greatest guardian alive. As Xiao Han watched her, he noticed something he had completely overlooked in his previous life. Murong Jin never once walked beside his own fiancée. Su Qingli was always several steps behind, like a subordinate rather than the woman he was destined to marry. For the first time, Xiao Han began questioning everything he had failed to notice in his previous life. As Xiao Han continued watching her, Su Qingli suddenly stopped walking, as though she had sensed someone's gaze. She slowly turned around. Her cold eyes met his. For a brief moment, the world around them seemed to disappear. Neither of them looked away. One carried the regret of an entire lifetime. The other had no idea why Xiao Han was watching her. After a long moment, Su Qingli calmly withdrew her gaze, as if nothing had happened, leaving Xiao Han seated in silence, unable to tear his eyes away from her. Just then, Murong Jin called her name. She immediately walked over, not like a beloved fiancé, but like someone responding to an order. Without a single word, Murong Jin handed her a jade token. The moment Su Qingli saw it, her expression remained calm, but her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around the token. No one else noticed, except Xiao Han. He had seen that same jade token before. In his previous life, every time Murong Jin handed Su Qingli that token, a bottle of life-saving medicine would arrive at the heavenly pavilion a few days later. Back then, Xiao Han believed the medicine had been prepared by Yunzi. Now he knew the truth. Every single bottle had been created with Su Qingli's own blood. His eyes slowly fell upon her pale complexion. She looked far weaker than he remembered, as though her body had already reached its limit, yet no one seemed to notice. Or perhaps, no one cared. As the banquet continued, Su Qingli quietly left the main hall alone. Murong Jin paid her no attention, watching her disappear into the distance. Xiao Han silently rose from his seat and followed her without hesitation. As the banquet continued, Su Qingli quietly left the main hall. The music and laughter gradually faded behind her. Only the sound of her footsteps echoed through the empty palace corridor. Not far behind, Xiao Han silently followed. His presence was perfectly concealed, yet from the very moment she stepped out of the banquet, Su Qingli had already sensed him. She neither slowed her pace nor looked back. Instead, a trace of doubt quietly surfaced in her mind. From the moment Xiao Han entered the banquet, his gaze had lingered on her more than once. Now, he was following her through the imperial palace. It was completely unlike the Xiao Han she knew. His heart had always belonged to Yunzi. There was no reason for him to suddenly pay attention to her, which left only one possibility. Murong Jin had sent him. If that was true, then changing her plans now would only expose her. So Su Qingli calmly continued walking, as though she had noticed nothing at all. Meanwhile, Xiao Han quietly watched her from behind. She knew, he was certain of it. Yet she never once tried to shake him off, nor did she show the slightest sign of panic. Instead, she continued toward the deepest part of the imperial palace. Her composure only deepened his suspicion. Just what kind of secret had she been hiding all these years? The palace buildings gradually disappeared behind them. Soon, they arrived at a secluded courtyard hidden within the imperial gardens. The courtyard was isolated from the rest of the palace. its entrance guarded by imperial elites. The moment they saw Su Qingli, every guard stepped aside without a word, as though they had long grown accustomed to her arrival. Xiao Han narrowed his eyes. In all his years serving the empire, he had never once noticed this place. For some reason, he felt that everything he had misunderstood in his previous life was waiting beyond those gates. Xiao Han remained hidden in the shadows. Only after the imperial guards changed their positions did he quietly slip into the secluded courtyard. The moment he stepped inside, a familiar fragrance drifted through the air. His footsteps suddenly stopped. He knew that scent better than anyone. For years, it had accompanied every bottle of medicine that kept him alive. Yet this place had never appeared in his memories. He followed the fragrance deeper into the courtyard, until a quiet voice reached his ears. Two palace servants were arranging precious spiritual herbs. Neither of them noticed Xiao Han's presence. One of them let out a quiet sigh. Miss Su had become weaker again. The medicine demanded more blood every single time. At this rate, she would not be able to endure much longer. The other servant simply lowered her head, as though such words had become an everyday conversation. Xiao Han felt his heart tighten. Before he could process what he had just heard, a faint sound came from inside the alchemy chamber. Through a narrow opening in the stone door, he finally saw her. Su Qingli stood alone before an ancient alchemy furnace. A jade bowl rested quietly beside her. Without the slightest hesitation, she drew a golden dagger across her palm. Bright crimson blood slowly flowed into the jade bowl. Drop after drop, her face gradually turned pale. Yet her expression never changed. She calmly added rare spiritual herbs into the furnace, then poured her own blood into the flames. The familiar medicinal fragrance instantly filled the chamber. Xiao Han's pupils violently contracted. There was no mistake. That fragrance, that formula, that medicine. It had been the very medicine that saved his life countless times. For years, he had believed Yunzi had refined it with her own hands, but the truth was unfolding before his eyes. Every single bottle had been created with Su Qingli's blood. When the medicine was finally complete, Su Qingli carefully sealed the jade bottle. She carefully bandaged her palm, then lowered her sleeve, as though concealing the wound had become a daily habit. Moments later, an imperial servant respectfully received the medicine. Before leaving the chamber, he carefully placed the jade bottle inside an exquisite wooden box marked with Yunzi's personal seal. Xiao Han stood frozen. He no longer needed anyone to explain the truth. Everything had been nothing more than a lie. The next morning, Yunzi personally arrived at the heavenly pavilion, just as she had done countless times before. She carried the familiar jade box containing the medicine. In the past, Xiao Han would always come out to greet her the moment she arrived. Sometimes, he would even take the medicine from her hands himself. But today, everything was different. Xiao Han stood quietly beside the window, his back facing the entrance, as though he had not even noticed her arrival. Sunlight streamed through the wooden lattice, casting a warm glow across his side profile. For years, Yunzi had only seen the man who silently followed behind her. She had never truly looked at him. Until this moment, standing quietly by the window, bathed in the morning light, Xiao Han seemed like an entirely different person. His sharp features, his cold expression, and the overwhelming aura that surrounded him made him seem almost untouchable. Only then did Yunzi realize the man she had always taken for granted was astonishingly handsome. Without realizing it, her heartbeat skipped ever so slightly. To Yunzi, Xiao Han was merely upset. The night before, she had spent most of the royal banquet surrounded by countless young geniuses, leaving him with almost no chance to approach her. She believed a little attention from her would be enough to restore everything, just as it always had. She gently told him that she had personally prepared the medicine for him, hoping he would stop dwelling on what had happened at the bank. Only then did Xiao Han slowly turn around. He looked at the jade box for a brief moment, before giving her a faint smile. It was polite, yet completely unfamiliar. Without another word, he instructed a servant to receive the medicine, then calmly explained that the heavenly pavilion had many urgent matters to attend to, and he could not accompany her any longer. Yanzi stood there in silence. She had expected gratitude, perhaps even the familiar joy in his eyes. Instead, she was treated no differently than any other guest. As Xiao Han walked past her, he never looked back, leaving Yanzi standing alone. For the first time, she began to wonder what had changed him. Heavenly Pavilion remained brightly lit. Inside the study, Xiao Han quietly read through several intelligence reports. A shadow guard suddenly appeared, kneeling before him. The investigation into the Blood Alchemist clan was complete. According to every record they had uncovered, Su Qingli had obeyed every order from Murong Jin without exception. For years, she had offered her blood, refined medicine, and remained at the crown prince's side without resistance. At first glance, she appeared to be nothing more than a loyal fiancée. But the deeper the heavenly pavilion investigated, the stranger everything became. Every secret meeting, every hidden transaction, every movement made by the Blood Alchemist clan pointed toward a single objective. They were not serving the royal family. They were preparing for something. The shadow guard lowered his head. Another ancient record had also been discovered. It mentioned a forgotten blood covenant, one that had bound the Blood Alchemist clan to the Murong royal family for centuries. No one knew its full contents, but one thing was certain. As long as the covenant remained, Su Qingli could never openly turn her blade against Murong Jin. Xiao Han remained silent for a long moment. As every piece of the puzzle slowly fell into place, the shadow guard quietly withdrew, leaving the study completely silent. Only then did memories from his previous life begin flooding back. It was during this exact period the Blood Alchemist clan had secretly begun carrying out a plan to break the ancient blood covenant. After centuries of servitude, they had finally seen a chance to reclaim their freedom. They were only one step away from succeeding. But before that day could arrive, Yanzi declared the Blood Alchemist clan a heretical force, claiming their forbidden blood threatened the peace of the continent. Without hesitation, he had accepted her judgment. He personally led the Heavenly Pavilion to surround the Blood Alchemist clan. Su Qingli was captured alive. Her clan was destroyed. Back then, he believed he had eliminated a hidden threat, never once questioning the truth. For the next several months, Su Qingli remained imprisoned within the imperial palace, while he continued receiving the same life-saving medicine, day after day, until the strange poison tormenting him finally disappeared. Only now did Xiao Han understand. The day he was completely cured was also the day Su Qingli had nothing left to give. And not long after, she was led to the execution platform. Not because she had committed a crime, but because she was no longer useful. After his poison was finally cured, Yanzi came to him once again. She spoke of peace. She spoke of justice. She spoke of protecting the continent. Without hesitation, he believed every word, one after another. The great sects that opposed the imperial family fell beneath his sword. Countless elders, countless loyal subordinates, lost their lives following his orders. Xiao Han slowly closed his eyes. His fingers clenched into a fist. He had thought he was protecting the continent. Yet from beginning to end, he had only been the blade that carried out their will. When Xiao Han opened his eyes again, the bitterness in them had disappeared. Only an icy calm remained. Killing them would be far too merciful this time. He would destroy everything they had spent a lifetime building. Meanwhile, inside the Crown Prince's study, Murong Jin calmly reviewed several intelligence reports gathered from across the continent. Every piece of news brought the same conclusion. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Yanzi quietly stood nearby, listening as Murong Jin spoke of the future, one by one. The great sects would eventually submit to the imperial family. Only then could true peace be achieved across the continent. Yanzi silently agreed. She had always believed that a united continent was the only path to lasting peace. Yet, for reasons she couldn't explain, her thoughts drifted elsewhere. The image of Xiao Han standing beside the window resurfaced in her mind. His cold expression, his calm eyes, the quiet authority surrounding him. For years, she had only remembered the man who followed behind her, never the man who stood above the entire continent. Had Xiao Han always been that extraordinary? Or had she simply never noticed? The question lingered in her mind. Yanzi quietly lowered her gaze. For a fleeting moment, her heart had been shaken, but she quickly buried the thought. Compared to the peace she had spent her entire life pursuing, nothing else should matter. Neither of them realized. The man they believed would always stand beside them had already begun walking a different path. Deep within the bamboo forest, a hidden formation quietly dispersed. The drifting mist slowly faded. Su Qingli stepped out alone. The moment she looked ahead, she stopped. Standing beneath the swaying bamboo was Xiao Han. His robes gently fluttered in the breeze. His cold eyes calmly met hers, for the first time. A faint trace of surprise flashed across Su Qingli's eyes. She hadn't sensed anyone following her. Nor had the formation been disturbed. Her gaze swept across the entrance. Everything remained exactly as she had left it, with Xiao Han's cultivation. Breaking the formation would have taken only a single strike, which meant he had chosen not to enter. He had simply waited. The bamboo forest fell into silence. Su Qingli quietly met his gaze. She waited, waiting for him to explain why he had followed her all the way here. After all, someone like Xiao Han would never appear without a reason. Yet, Xiao Han remained silent, his lips parted slightly, only to close again, for the first time. The man who had faced countless life-and-death battles without hesitation didn't know how to begin. In his previous life, he had never once tried to understand the woman standing before him. Now, he finally wanted to. But no words seemed worthy enough. The silence between them grew even longer. Neither of them looked away. One quietly waited for an explanation. The other was searching for words. He should have spoken long ago. The silence lingered until Xiao Han was the first to look away. He slowly lowered his eyes, as though searching for the right words, only to realize none of them were enough. Su Qingli quietly watched him. The master of the heavenly pavilion, who was feared across the continent, now stood before her, unable to utter a single sentence. The sight felt strangely unreal. After a long while, Xiao Han finally spoke. He had not come on Murong Jin's orders, nor had he come because of Yanzi. He had only come to see whether she was safe. Su Qingli's expression remained calm, yet inside, she found those words difficult to believe. The Xiao Han she knew would never concern himself with someone like her, not unless Yanzi or Murong Jin wished it. Xiao Han didn't try to explain further. He knew nothing he said now could earn her trust. Instead, he quietly stepped aside, leaving the narrow path completely open. The meaning couldn't have been clearer. He had no intention of stopping her, nor interfering with anything she wished to do. Su Qingli looked at the open path, then back at Xiao Han. For a brief moment, neither of them moved. Then she walked past him, without the slightest hesitation. After only a few steps, Xiao Han finally spoke. Xiao Han quietly revealed. Murong Jin had already begun searching for the Blood Alchemist clan. The Blood Covenant ritual would not remain hidden forever. Su Qingli stopped. Her footsteps froze. Xiao Han continued. Murong Jin had already prepared an ambush. Every escape route would be completely cut off. Su Qingli slowly turned around. A trace of disbelief flashed across her calm eyes. She asked why he had revealed those secrets to her. Xiao Han calmly revealed one final truth. He had finally discovered who had truly been refining the medicine that had kept him alive all these years. It had never been Yunzi. It had always been Su Qingli. He had spent his entire life repaying the wrong person. This time, he refused to make the same mistake again. Silence filled the bamboo forest. Su Qingli remained quiet. She still didn't trust Xiao Han, but there was no benefit for Xiao Han in revealing any of this. If his warning was true, the Blood Covenant ritual would have a chance to succeed, and at this moment, nothing mattered more than the freedom of the Blood Alchemist clan. Just as in his previous life, Yunzi declared before the imperial court that the Blood Alchemist clan had fallen into a demonic path. If the Blood Covenant ritual succeeded, countless sects would fall under their control. For the peace of the cultivation world, the Blood Alchemist clan had to be eradicated. The entire court fell silent. Murong Jin prepared to summon the only man capable of leading such a campaign, the master of the Heavenly Pavilion. But this time, Xiao Han never appeared. The seat that had always stood beside Murong Jin remained empty for the first time. Murong Jin frowned. Even Yunzi found herself staring at the empty seat. Xiao Han had never ignored her before. The next morning, Yunzi personally arrived at the Heavenly Pavilion. She believed Xiao Han was merely occupied. Just as he had countless times before, he would immediately answer her call. Instead, she was stopped outside the main hall. The attendants respectfully lowered their heads. The pavilion master was not receiving any visitors. Not even her. For a brief moment, Yunzi stood frozen. In all these years, no one had ever dared refuse her. Yet today, the gates of the Heavenly Pavilion remained firmly closed. Behind those gates, Xiao Han quietly read the intelligence reports on his desk, without even lifting his head. Just as in his previous life, the Blood Alchemist clan finally began the Blood Covenant ritual. Deep within the hidden valley, Su Qingli stood at the center of the formation. While the elders surrounded her, every preparation had been completed. The ritual had finally begun, but this time, Murong Jin had prepared an even larger force. Without Xiao Han leading the Heavenly Pavilion, he had no choice but to mobilize imperial troops and several allied sects. Every route had been calculated. Every escape path had been sealed. Formation breakers were positioned at the designated locations. The assault was scheduled to begin at the exact moment the Blood Covenant reached its critical stage. Everything was flawless. At least, that was what Murong Jin believed. The first wave of troops moved toward the Eastern Passage, but they arrived too late. The second formation breaker was supposed to destroy the outer barrier. Yet it failed at the crucial moment. Another force took the western route, only to discover that the passage was far more difficult to cross than expected. One failure followed another, until the carefully arranged assault began falling apart. Murong Jin received report after report, each one more inexplicable than the last. There was no betrayal, no intercepted message, no enemy attack. Nothing that could explain why a perfectly planned operation was collapsing. Meanwhile, deep inside the valley, the Blood Covenant continued. The formation grew brighter. The ancient seal began to crack, and the blood binding the Blood Alchemist clan slowly began to disappear. Outside the valley, Murong Jin's forces finally reached the final barrier, but by then, it was already too late. The Blood Covenant had reached its final stage. Far from the battlefield, a subordinate knelt before Xiao Han and delivered the latest report. One failure after another had disrupted Murong Jin's carefully arranged assault. Xiao Han listened without expression. Everything was proceeding exactly as he had intended. No one knew. Murong Jin did not know. Yunzi did not know. Even Su Qingli did not know who had protected the ritual from the shadows. Xiao Han simply closed his eyes. In his previous life, he had arrived at this very moment to destroy everything. This time, he would protect the people he should have protected from the beginning. And as the blood covenant finally completed, Xiao Han remained silent. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, he had chosen the right people to protect. Yanzi sat alone in her chamber. Her mind kept returning to everything that had happened. Murong Jin had the imperial throne within reach. He possessed authority. He commanded armies. Yet, he was still too weak. Even after all his preparations, the blood covenant had succeeded. For the first time, Yanzi began to question her choice. If she truly wanted to preserve peace throughout the cultivation world, she should not stand beside the person with the greatest authority. She needed the person with the greatest strength. And there was only one person who came to mind. Xiao Han. Su Qingli was summoned to the imperial hall. After the blood covenant was completed, Murong Jin could no longer force her to obey. The blood contract had been broken. The Blood Alchemist clan was no longer bound to the imperial family. Any attempt to capture Su Qingli now would be no different from openly declaring war on the entire clan. Yet Murong Jin still summoned her. He wanted her blood. Yanzi wanted it as well. But this time, Su Qingli had nothing left to give them. The contract was gone. The old agreements were void. Even her engagement to Murong Jin no longer held any meaning. She respectfully bowed before the crown prince, then turned and walked away. Murong Jin's expression darkened. He could only watch her leave. For the first time, he had the authority to summon her, but no longer had the power to command her. Beside him, Yanzi's expression also turned cold. But unlike Murong Jin, her thoughts had already shifted elsewhere. If Su Qingli's blood was no longer available, she would have to find another source. That night, Yanzi secretly entered the imperial library. The palace had already fallen silent. Only the dim glow of the lamps remained between the endless shelves. She searched through ancient medical records, one book after another, searching for a way to replace Su Qingli's blood. The medicine Xiao Han needed could no longer depend on the Blood Alchemist clan. Yanzi refused to accept that she had lost her only source. She continued searching until she found an ancient medical record. It described another possible source of blood. Yanzi's eyes slowly brightened. She continued reading. Her expression gradually changed. For a moment, she hesitated. The method had its limitations, and the consequences were not insignificant. Yanzi remained silent. Her fingers tightened around the ancient record. She knew there was a risk. But without Su Qingli's blood, she had no other choice. After a long silence, Yanzi closed the book. Her hesitation disappeared. She had already made her decision. Meanwhile, inside the heavenly pavilion, Xiao Han remained in his study. A subordinate knelt before him. He reported that Yanzi had entered the imperial library. Xiao Han listened quietly. Then, a faint cold smile appeared on his lips, as if everything was slowly moving exactly where he expected it to. And beneath the silent night, a new game had already begun. After returning to the Blood Alchemist clan, Su Qingli received a report from one of the elders. Traces of the heavenly pavilion had been discovered near the ritual grounds. The traces were found along several routes. Those routes had been used by Murong Jin's forces, yet the heavenly pavilion had never attacked the clan. The blood covenant had proceeded smoothly. No enemy had reached the ritual grounds. The ritual had been completed without interruption. Su Qingli had believed it was because of the clan's own strength. Their formations had held. Their defenses had remained intact. But the report made her reconsider everything. Why had the heavenly pavilion appeared there? Why had they been positioned along the routes of Murong Jin's forces? And why had they done nothing against the blood alchemists? One name came to her mind, Xiao Han. He had known about Murong Jin's plan. He had warned her before the ritual. And he had told her that the ritual would be allowed to proceed. At the time, she had not known whether to believe him. Now, she had reason to question that doubt. Perhaps his words had not been empty. Perhaps he had truly acted behind the scenes. But Su Qingli needed certainty. She could not base her judgment on assumptions. That evening, she went to the heavenly pavilion. She came alone. She did not announce her arrival. She simply asked to see Xiao Han. When she finally entered the inner courtyard, Xiao Han was already waiting. His expression remained calm. His eyes settled on her. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. She had come here to question him, yet his calmness made her wonder whether he already knew why she had come. Su Qingli broke the silence. She asked about the heavenly pavilion's presence near the ritual grounds. Xiao Han did not deny it. He calmly admitted that he had sent his people there. Su Qingli's eyes narrowed slightly. She asked whether he had deliberately protected the blood covenant. Xiao Han simply nodded. There was no attempt to hide it. No excuse. No demand for her gratitude. Su Qingli studied him carefully. She had expected him to avoid the question. Instead, he had answered without hesitation. She then asked why he had done it. Xiao Han remained calm. He simply reminded her of what he had told her before the ritual. He believed the Blood Alchemist clan deserved the freedom to continue its ritual. Su Qingli fell silent. His answer was simple, yet, for some reason, she found it difficult to dismiss. She finally made her decision. She would finish his treatment herself. Not because she trusted him, and not because she cared about his life. He had protected the ritual. She would repay that favor. After that, they would be even. Xiao Han listened quietly. Then, a faint smile appeared on his lips. He simply nodded. Su Qingli was slightly surprised. She had expected him to argue. Instead, he accepted her decision without hesitation. He was unexpectedly easy to talk to. Su Qingli looked at him for another moment, then quickly turned away. She left without saying anything more. Behind her, Xiao Han remained where he was. That faint smile still lingered on his face. Yunzi met Murong Jin in the Crown Prince's study. She told him that she had found another way to replace Su Qingli's blood. The method required blood from young cultivators with exceptional spiritual potential. Murong Jin immediately understood the danger. Those young geniuses belonged to powerful sects. Their families would never allow them to be harmed, but Yunzi had already thought of that. He knew how much influence Yunzi had over those young cultivators. After a moment, he agreed. Yunzi began selecting her targets. She chose several young geniuses from different sects. Each one had extraordinary spiritual talent. Each one trusted the Sengses, and none of them knew why their blood was needed. They only knew one thing. The Sengses needed their blood, so they offered it willingly. Yunzi began refining the new medicine. The result was not as good as the medicine made from Su Qingli's blood, but it was still effective. That was enough for Yunzi. She believed Xiao Han would never notice the difference. After all, she had always been the one bringing his medicine. She had never told him who truly created it. That afternoon, she personally brought the new medicine to the heavenly pavilion, and this time, Xiao Han agreed to see her. A servant stepped forward and accepted the medicine box. Xiao Han looked at Yunzi. A faint smile appeared on his lips. He quietly thanked her. Yunzi felt relieved. She had not seen that expression from him in a long time. To her, it was a sign that he was finally becoming warmer toward her again. Perhaps he was slowly remembering the feelings he once had for her. She only needed more time, more chances to stay beside him, and perhaps she could win him back. Yunzi left the heavenly pavilion with a faint smile. She believed everything was moving in her favor, but after she disappeared from sight, Xiao Han's expression changed. A cold smile appeared on his lips. He knew exactly what Yunzi was trying to do. Yet, he simply played along with her plan. A few days passed. On Yunzi's side, everything seemed normal, until one of the young geniuses suddenly noticed something strange. His cultivation had begun to decline. At first, he thought it was only temporary. But the problem did not disappear. Another young genius soon experienced the same problem. Yunzi's expression changed. Something was wrong. She immediately examined the young genius herself. She tried several methods to restore his cultivation, but none of them worked. His condition continued to worsen. Soon, another young genius suffered the same problem. Yanzi could no longer remain calm. She went to Merongjin for help. Merongjin summoned several renowned masters. They examined the young geniuses one after another, but none of them could find the cause, and none of them could restore their cultivation. Yanzi's heart sank. She had never expected the problem to become this serious. There was only one person left who might be able to help. Xiao Han. Yanzi immediately went to the heavenly pavilion. When she arrived, a servant told her Xiao Han was currently busy with another guest, so she waited outside the gates. She believed Xiao Han would come out eventually. She frowned. She was used to others waiting for her, yet now, she was the one waiting, and the longer she waited, the more impatient she became. Time slowly passed, until the afternoon slowly turned into evening. Then, the gates finally opened. Yanzi looked toward the entrance. Xiao Han walked out, and beside him was Su Qingli. Yanzi froze. Her eyes widened in shock. She had never expected the guest to be her. Xiao Han personally escorted Su Qingli toward her carriage. Meanwhile, several days later, the first signs of trouble began to appear. The condition of the young geniuses began to worsen. Several sect masters began comparing their conditions. At first, they thought it was a strange illness, but the symptoms were too similar. Their cultivation was declining. Their spiritual foundations were weakening. And then, one master noticed something. His disciple had given blood to Yanzi. Another master checked his own son. He had done the same. Soon, the same connection appeared again and again. Every young genius who had given blood to Yanzi had suffered the same decline. The masters finally understood. Their blood extraction had damaged their cultivation. The masters were furious. They immediately brought the matter before the emperor. That night, the imperial hall was filled with sect masters and the families of the injured young geniuses. They demanded justice. They demanded an investigation. The emperor's expression darkened. His own crown prince and the Sengses had become the center of a blood extraction scandal. The atmosphere inside the hall grew heavier. Then, their attention slowly turned toward Xiao Han. If their blood had been taken to make medicine for him, then perhaps he knew something. Even the emperor looked toward him. The masters waited for his answer. Xiao Han remained completely calm, and finally, he spoke. The medicine he had been taking was not made by Yanzi. The entire hall fell silent. He revealed that the medicine had been made by Su Qingli, and the medicine he had relied on all this time had always come from her. Yanzi froze. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Only now did she understand. Xiao Han had known the truth all along, yet he had never stopped her. He had simply allowed her to continue. The masters were stunned. Even the emperor could hardly believe it. The medicine that had always been praised for its remarkable effects had never been made by Yanzi. Merongjin was equally stunned. He had trusted Yanzi for so long, yet now he realized that she had deceived him from the very beginning. The Sengses he had always trusted was nothing but a fraud. Merongjin's face darkened with fury. He had been helping a woman who had deceived everyone, and now, even he had become part of her deception. Merongjin and Yunzi were taken away by the guards. They were placed under arrest for further investigation. The imperial hall slowly fell silent. The emperor and the sect masters asked Su Qingli to treat the young geniuses. Su Qingli agreed. She examined their conditions carefully. Their spiritual foundations had been damaged by the blood extraction. The medicine needed to be refined with extreme precision. And this time, Xiao Han decided to help. Su Qingli began preparing the ingredients. Xiao Han stood beside her. His spiritual energy entered the furnace. The flames immediately became perfectly stable. Su Qingli paused. She watched his control carefully. Not a single trace of his spiritual power was wasted. His control was far beyond what she had imagined. For the first time, she understood why the title of Master of the Heavenly Pavilion carried such weight. It was not an empty reputation. Yet Xiao Han seemed completely unaware of the change in her gaze. He simply continued supporting the refinement. Su Qingli adjusted the ingredients. Xiao Han controlled the spiritual flames. Their movements gradually fell into perfect rhythm. Neither needed to explain what the other should do. They simply understood. Soon, the medicine was successfully refined. Su Qingli examined the finished medicine. Even she was surprised by its quality. With Xiao Han's powerful spiritual energy, the medicine was even better than she had expected. The young geniuses began taking the medicine, one by one. Their spiritual energy slowly stabilized. Their cultivation stopped declining. Then, their damaged foundations began to recover. The sect masters were stunned. None of them had expected the treatment to work so quickly. One master looked at Xiao Han and Su Qingli, then laughed. With abilities like these, if the two of you ever married, perhaps our empire would never have to worry about peace again. Another master laughed. Two people this capable working together. Perhaps even the cultivation world would benefit. Su Qingli remained calm. But a faint surprise appeared in her eyes. Xiao Han only smiled, watching Su Qingli stand beside him. He suddenly felt fortunate. In his previous life, he had protected the wrong people. But this time, he finally knew who deserved his protection. And he would never make the same mistake again. After the treatment was completed, Xiao Han personally escorted Su Qingli home. When they arrived, Su Qingli stepped down from the carriage. Xiao Han looked at her. Then, he calmly mentioned what the sect masters had said. Their suggestion was not unreasonable. Su Qingli was slightly surprised. She looked at him. But then, she calmly explained that her priority was protecting her clan. Marriage was not something she had considered. He looked at her, his gaze softened with warmth. Then, he spoke softly. If protecting her clan was her greatest concern, there was no man in this world more capable of helping her protect it than him. Su Qingli froze. She had not expected him to say that so directly, but after thinking about it, she could not completely deny his words. One day, she would have to consider marriage. And if she had to choose someone, there was indeed no one more reliable than Xiao Han. After a moment of silence, Su Qingli finally answered. She would think about it. Then, she turned and left. Xiao Han remained where he was, watching her retreating figure. A gentle smile appeared on his lips. Meanwhile, in the imperial court, Murong Jin and Junzi finally received their punishment. The sect masters had demanded justice, and the emperor could no longer ignore their demands. To appease the furious sect masters, Murong Jin was stripped of his position as crown prince. He was ordered to leave the capital and was sent to the frontier. Yanzi was stripped of her title as Sengsis. Her cultivation was completely taken away. Her wealth and privileges were revoked. From that day onward, she became nothing more than an ordinary citizen, weak, poor, and powerless. That night, Su Qingli stood quietly in the garden pavilion. She gazed at the moon above. The peaceful night was finally free of the day's turmoil. Then, a familiar figure approached. Xiao Han arrived with a small medicine bottle. He handed it to her. Su Qingli looked at it curiously. She opened it and recognized the medicine immediately. It was a blood-replenishing medicine. She had lost a great deal of blood while treating the young geniuses. She paused for a moment. She had not expected him to notice. She accepted the medicine and softly thanked him. Xiao Han smiled softly. Then, he spoke in a gentle voice. He told her she did not need to thank him. After all, he could not let his future bride exhaust herself like this. Su Qingli's face turned slightly red. She lowered her eyes. Xiao Han looked at her with a gentle gaze. Then, he simply reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Su Qingli froze. But she did not move away. She remained silent and said nothing. Yet, her reaction was already an answer. After losing everything, Yanzi's life became miserable. The woman who had once been worshipped as a senses was now nothing more than an ordinary woman. She had no cultivation, no wealth, no status. She struggled just to survive. Then one day, she heard the news. Xiao Han and Su Qingli were getting married. It was said to be the most spectacular wedding the capital had ever seen. The entire city was celebrating. The streets were filled with decorations. Crowds gathered along the wedding procession. Yanzi stood among them. She watched the magnificent procession approach. At the front, Xiao Han rode a magnificent horse. Behind him, the bridal carriage carrying Su Qingli slowly followed. Yanzi's hands slowly tightened. After everything that had happened, there was still only one question in her mind. Why? Then, as the wedding procession passed through the street, Yanzi suddenly stepped into the middle of the road. The procession came to a halt. The guards immediately moved forward. But Yanzi refused to leave. She looked toward Xiao Han. She had finally found the person she had been searching for. Xiao Han pulled on the reins, then slowly dismounted. He looked at the disheveled woman standing before him. For a moment, he did not recognize her. Yanzi stared at him. She finally asked the question that had remained in her mind for so long. Why had he deceived her? Why had he let her continue making the medicine, when he had already been receiving medicine made by Su Qingli? And why had he been so cruel to her? A cold smile appeared on Xiao Han's lips. He looked at Yanzi calmly. Then, he spoke softly. Sometimes, cruel people are born from those who were once victims. Yanzi froze. She did not understand what he meant. But as she looked at him, a terrifying thought slowly emerged in her mind. Could Xiao Han know something? Could he know about her plan with Morong Jin? Could he know that they had intended to use him to destroy the Blood Alchemist clan? And worse, could he know that they had planned to eliminate him once he was no longer useful? Yanzi's face slowly turned pale. So, he had known all along, yet before she could ask another question, Xiao Han turned away. Yanzi was pushed back by the guards. She lost her balance and fell to the ground. She watched helplessly as the wedding procession continued on its way. Yanzi remained sitting on the ground, still unable to recover from the shock. But even then, she still did not believe she was completely wrong. In her mind, everything had been necessary. The world needed peace, and peace always required sacrifice. Surely, Xiao Han should have understood that. Surely, he should have understood why she had done everything she did. But Xiao Han did not understand. And he no longer wanted to understand. He had already learned what that kind of peace truly meant. He had lost too much because of it. Now, he only wanted a quieter life, to protect the people who truly deserved his protection. And this time, he would choose them himself.